Alltrac. So today I have a special Thanksgiving video for you all that's going to have a little lesson about buying things from old ladies, and it's going to help a car stop sounding like a turkey. So a year and a half ago or so, I was on Facebook Marketplace and I ran across a Synapse Blow Off Valve that was brand new. And I was wanting one anyway, something different from the stock one, because the stock one, it works, but from what I've read, it's not super great at a high boost. And it would make kind of an interesting noise. It sounded like a TIE fighter, which was kind of cool, but I didn't think that was actually the way it was supposed to sound. So anyway, I met some little old lady a few towns over. I bought it from her, thought everything was fine. It looked brand new. So here we go. I go to install it a few months back, had all the components needed for it. And what I found is that the screws where you tighten it to the pipe had been stripped. So apparently what happened is they stripped those aluminum threads. It wasn't used, but they sold to me anyway. So I'm a little bit wary of buying used parts from now on. I mean, when it comes to wheels and things like that, you really have to be able to inspect things and look for the integrity and make sure all the things are good on it. So what I end up gonna do was gonna look at what happened, why I decided to finally put the blow-off valve on, and then how we rectify and repair the Synapse blow-off valve, and then the setup I'm gonna go with to run the car with for the rest of the year. So last time I went out driving, the car was just gobbling like a turkey in between every shift, and I knew something was wrong with some sort of vacuum. But what happened is it blew the top off the blow-off valve. And as you can see, and it can snap back on, but then I did that while driving, and as soon as I got it on again, popped off again. So I could probably disassemble it and glue it, but I'm going to try to install my new blow-off valve. But before I do that, listen to this clip of how it sounds with the current setup. What you're hearing, at first, it's kind of cool because it reminds me of the angriest Celica's rabid squirrels that they mention that comes from the wastegate. However, what you're hearing is surge, and that is terrible for the turbo, and I want this resolved ASAP. So I've got everything taped off, and I've gone ahead and drilled my hole, put in my helicoil, you can see here, and everything threads in properly. So I've taped this up. Even though I'm working from the bottom, I've got it taped up, and I'm actually going to do another inspection on the inside to make sure everything's good. One little trick I figured out with these helicoils, because they're too long, and I want them to be just the right length, is I take one, and the end that has the attachment that I want to hold, I just put my pliers in there, just to give something to hold on to. And then I start cutting with these wire cutters, one coil at a time. And I found that rather than trying to get the 3 coils at one time, doing one coil at a time keeps you from stretching things out and allows me to put it in a little bit easier. So there we go. I have one now that's the proper length. So I'm gonna go ahead and thread in the last one, and then we can look at reassembly and cleanup and go on to the next step. So it seems the helicoil worked. I was able to get it on both sides and is now clamping onto this piece properly. This is from an Evo kit they offer. And so I actually took bits of it apart to inspect, make sure there was no metal in there. I'd blocked off the path to make sure there was nothing. So I was going to install everything, and I'd run into a slight hang up. I'm actually not familiar with these lines, or I wasn't at the time. And I wasn't sure if it was just some sort of cover to protect the nipples or something along those lines. I wasn't sure, so as I looked into it, I found there are pneumatic push fittings. And I could have pulled them off and I could have converted it, but I went ahead and ordered a pneumatic push fitting. They're 4mm, and all they do is you push inside and they just lock. And it's kind of a cool system. I mean, it seems so easy that I wouldn't normally have trusted it, but after what I read up on them, they're pretty good. And to convert it to a NTP, I'm just going to put this on here and use the exact same line that I was using for the factory blow-off valve. So I'm going to probably do some changes to this After I sort of test it out and make sure everything works the way I want it to, I'll replace some lines and make everything a little bit tidied up. But I think it's ready to go. So I'm gonna hook it up, see if there's any fine tuning needed, and then we'll see what it sounds like. Do it again. This is using what I had laying around as far as hoses goes. So what I have here is a temporary setup. I'm using the previous hose that I had on here to hold the blow-off valve, but I'm using a regular hose I modified to fit. I think if I want to make everything connect the way that's most kosher, I'm gonna have to get new hoses and maybe do a little bit of welding or use some weird sort of angles here. But this is just to test everything out, make sure everything's working properly. So let's go ahead and take it out, see what it sounds like recirculated, and then once I'm kind of confirmed that everything's working the way it's supposed to, I'll order new hoses and we'll do a final setup on this. So the initial drive, I actually noticed a couple things. One, the engine felt more responsive, which might not be fully a result of this blow-off valve versus the old type. It could also be a result of the non-functional blow-off valve. So if it was already leaking or had some sort of problem beforehand, that could have been a result by improving the vacuum right there. So I'm not gonna go ahead and say that this is better in that respect, but it is something I did notice. The other thing I noticed is it's much quieter. So rather than have the turkey gobble or sort of the loud hiss, it was more really just a psh, just a very simple, quiet sound, which is stealthy and it's not bad, but I have gotten kind of used to loud noises coming out of this car every time you push the gas, you let off, you change gears. It is sort of adds to the effect. So it's just something to get used to, but that might change because I have the new parts. I have a K&N 1-inch filter that's gonna go on the end of the blow-off valve so that it could vent to the atmosphere. And the reason you need this is because when there is no boost, it is open. It's a piston type. It's not like a traditional blow-off valve. So which means I have to cap off the intake. And the reason I'm using a reinforced heavy-duty silicone is because I have used non-reinforced before and I destroyed my last turbo with that. It actually sucked in the whole intake pipe into the turbo and wrecked it. So I don't take those kind of risks anymore. I could have probably used a simple rubber cap. I'm not gonna take that risk. Then the other part, which this is not as pictured from the website, is an adapter. It is a 28 millimeter to 38 millimeter. So it's 32 millimeter on the blow-off valve end, on the intake part of it, and it's 28 millimeter coming off the intercooler. So that's the standard blow-off valve size. So there's a couple tricks I've been looking at on how to cut this, and I'm gonna put a pipe in here, put a clamp, and then use the clamp as my guide for cutting it the right length, because this is quite a bit longer than what I think I need. I wanna kind of keep it in the place that it's at. So I'm gonna get this fitted, we're gonna see how it sounds, how it looks, and we'll go from there. So here we have the full install. This is the new hose, which was much harder on the intercooler than I expected. Probably could have been another millimeter or two larger, but I did get on most of the way and it is fairly secure. I also have the cap on there and the K&N filter on the end of it. There is a metal coupler on the intake line there, and so it didn't keep scratching on it. I put a heat blanket I had extra laying around and some zip ties. So of course, because race car, got to come up with solutions with what you have. My only complaint about this hose is it's not as rigid as the other one. So I feel like I need to make a little bit of a bracket or have some sort of restraint to keep this from having any kind of movement. Now, maybe a little movement's okay, but I don't want it to rub against anything and wear anything out. So I'll rectify that. And I think for now, this is looking set. So the install is complete. Everything seems to be working properly. Using the K&N for venting the atmosphere. Got the new solid hoses in there. And I'm gonna run it this way for the rest of the year. So, hope you all have a good Thanksgiving. Stay safe, stay inside, and we'll see you all next time.